Welcome, everyone, to Everything Entrepreneurship. I'm John Boitnott. We talk about businesses. This is a great start to the show. I'm joined by Stefan Thomas over in the UK. Hi, Stefan. How are you?
I'm really well. It's the opposite end of the day for me here in a very wet and cold Oxford. Tea time on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, I've been interviewing a lot of folks in the UK lately. That means generally I get up early and they are at the end of their workday, and so it's kind of like the 8 hour gap between us, but it works out. This is Everything Entrepreneurship. It's a podcast that I do with various business owners on how to run your business better. We talk with entrepreneurs like yourself who are out there working hard on their business and trying to live better lives. And more productive lives, more successful lives. And it's nice to have you. Tell us about your background and what you do for a living over there in the UK.
It's really good to be here. I've been really stereotypically English, haven't I? I mentioned the weather already in the first few seconds of the conversation. I speak for a living, John. I speak on stage at various conferences, award ceremonies. My first event of the year was speaking at an awards ceremony 2 weeks ago, where I was the keynote speaker. I write books as well.
Mm.
I'm very involved in the business networking scene here in the UK. That's what I talk about when I'm on stage, business networking skills. That's what I teach when I'm working with people, and that's typically what I write books about as well.
Yeah, Business Networking for Dummies, I believe, is one of your books, and it's been more than a decade since you wrote that. Tell us about that book and what are some of the big messages that you impart to people in Business Networking for Dummies?
I was asked to write Business Networking for Dummies. The publishers are Wiley, the American publishers. They came and asked me if I wanted to write a book for them because they met me at a networking event in London. There was a business show in London where I was one of the speakers during the day, and the publishers of the Dummies books were there, and they came and asked me if I'd write the book about networking. So I loved that because by going to all of the networking events, I'd done something over 1,000 networking events at that point. And by being at that event in London, I ended up meeting those folk from Wiley, the publishers. The purpose of the book is to make it simple for people to go to networking events. And although it was written a decade ago, of course, the world opened up for us in around 2020 because when I wrote the book, we used to drive to networking events and meet with people there. And we still do that, but also so many people network online now using Zoom and Hopin and other platforms. So in the 11 years since I wrote the book, social media has become much more of a thing than it was. Networking events have, a lot of them have migrated to hybrid or virtual events. So the skills are still really important. And actually, the world of networking has opened up in that period as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so obviously you have the first question that popped into my mind was so what makes this guy so knowledgeable about networking? Doesn't everyone do well, that's not true. A lot of people have issues with networking. And so what are some of the big mistakes that you see people? Well, number one, it sounds like you've actually done a lot of networking, but when did you kind of realize, okay, I need to write a book about networking, or I have a lot of information that I can impart about networking. So, it comes back to that question: why are you such an expert in networking?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
why me? I ask exactly that same question when I'm standing on stage in front of people. What qualifies me to be talking about this? Well, my first networking event, which was in 2005, the first time I went to anything called a breakfast networking event, I was really nervous. I was almost too nervous to stand up and do the 60-second introduction.
Hmm.
Since then, I've won client. Well, I've they asked me to write the book about networking because I met them at a networking event. I've worked with people like Lloyd's Bank in the UK, BT, British Telecom, loads of network marketing companies across Europe as well, all of which I won through networking. So a big part of my qualification is that from being absolutely terrified of it, I've managed to make it work for me. At the time at which we record this interview, I've just booked my first speaking gig for 2026
Hmm.
from someone that I met at a networking event in May of last year. So I'm continuing to make networking work for me at quite a scale. And then it turned out that I was able to teach people how to do it. So I was running networking events back in when they first asked me to write the book in 2012 ish. I was running networking events at quite a large scale. We ran 5,000 networking events a year here in the UK. And a lot of members of that organization were asking me to show them how to network better.
Yeah.
So I had started speaking at the networking events, doing little 15-minute presentations on how to do your 60-second introduction, how to follow up with people. And then some business shows asked me to speak there. And then these guys came along and said, would you like to write the book? So my qualification ends up being quite circular. I was asked to write the book because I was at a networking event. I've won quite a lot of business from networking events, and it does turn out I'm able to teach people how to do it better as well.
5,000 networking events in 2012. What organization were you working with? It sounds like that was that was that a local organization? Was that a UK wide organization?
It was a UK wide organisation called For Networking. The two owners of For Networking at the time, Brad Burton and Terry Cooper, they were the guys who owned it. And then I was one of their directors, and I was responsible for our breakfast network, running the breakfast events, which on back in those days before the pandemic, on any day of the week, we had 20 or so networking events running all across the UK in different towns. I know in the US, BNI was founded, and BNI is the world's largest networking organization. And in the UK, we at the time we were the fastest growing networking organization over here.
Wow. Well, so you've seen a lot of speakers, and
Yeah.
and you've been to a lot of networking events, and you have done a lot of speaking yourself. But as far as networking goes, you've seen a lot of what works and a lot of what doesn't work. What would you say is the biggest mistake that people make at a networking event?
What I've seen over the years is that people get networking wrong when they put the networking label over it, because most of the time we know how to talk to people, right? We get that right. But as soon as you call it networking, before you put it in inverted commas, then people think that they've got to go into a room full of people and start selling to them straight away. And that's what I spot as the biggest mistake that people make. They mistake a networking event for a sales meeting.
Hmm.
So if I had something to sell to you and I emailed you and said, John, can we have a meeting because I want to talk to you about this thing that I want to sell to you? If we had that meeting, you would be set up to listen to me selling to you. You'd be listening to the service. But when people go to a networking event, they go to promote themselves. That's why people turn up at networking events. So if you immediately start selling to those people, the environment's wrong, the setup is wrong. It's not why they turned up at the event that morning. So what I found is that the people who got it right when I observed it were the people who actually put some effort into building the relationships first and didn't just go in selling. People mistake a networking event as somewhere where they should immediately start selling to other people. Build the relationships a little bit first. Of course, I started networking in 2005. In around 2007, we all got this massive gift called social media, which enables us to meet with someone in the first place and then keep the conversation going on social media. So the thing that people get wrong is they think that you turn up, you try and sell to people in the room, and then you leave. Whereas actually, start the conversation, go in and meet people, get to know people. I got to know people, which has led to me being introduced to you, which has led to this opportunity for me.
Mm.
But the people who introduced me to you, imagine I'd just met them and tried to sell to them in the first place. And if they didn't buy from me, that was the end of the conversation. I'd have never had this opportunity to speak to you. And yet, that's how most people approach networking. That's the biggest mistake that people make. They think it's all about going in and trying to sell to people straight away.
Yeah, I have you ever heard of startup grind?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so I was around Derek Anderson, God, like the guy who started Startup Grind. I would say 2011 or 2010. I was still a good friend of his. Still right for his company Bevy, as a matter of fact. But he started Startup Grind, 15 years ago. I was around at the very first Startup Grind meetings before he expanded it. And he also, at one point he almost didn't continue on with it, but it ended up kind of exploding with the advent of Meetup, the app Meetup. That
Yeah.
that was he was able to get Jason Calacanis um, for a startup grind event. Anyway, suffice it to say, it blew up. And but he, what you're saying tracks with what he's found successful too, because um, one of the things that part of their philosophy that makes startup grind work is the idea that if you haven't introduced yourself to somebody to really get to know them and sort of start a friendship relationship, you really haven't you know made good on the promise of what a networking event is all about. It's really about the relationships, not so much about selling yourself. So you reminded me of that as you were talking. But that's great to hear. So is that, the fact that people come in with a sales attitude about themselves, is that what makes networking events so stressful for people? Or have you found that, what are the things, why do people they get so stressed out about doing a networking event? I know for me it was always, I was scared of talking in front of everyone, but what would
Yeah.
you say?
People get really scared of the 60-second introduction, that bit, and I get that completely. Before I started speaking professionally, I was really scared of that bit. I think as well, when we're growing up, our parents and the school and the television adverts tell us don't talk to strangers, and then in the world of work and in self-employment and entrepreneurship, you're thrown into this networking event, and the first thing you've got to do is go up and talk to a bunch of folk who you've never met. And I found that really difficult. When I first started going to networking events, I just imagined in my head that everyone else in the room was more successful than me. They probably had more money than me. They had a better car, bigger house. And I built all of this stuff up in my head. So who am I to go and engage with these folk? And I think a lot of people feel like that. That whole thing of just walking into a room and starting to introduce yourself to people, that somehow doesn't feel natural. However, if we take away the networking label and put people in a pub or at the school gates when they're dropping off their kids or at the golf club or at the gym, or people chat to other people, and yet we put the networking label on it and it makes us all really nervous because we think we have to do something different. We think we have to be more businesslike, and actually just chatting to people, just starting the relationship is what has worked for me over and over again.
Uh, well, okay. So yeah, the key thing is to just get in there and talk and just turn it into sort of a social occasion more and a little bit less of a uh,
Be human. Just
be-
just talk to other people in with I know it's stereotypical, but here in Oxford we talk about the weather a lot, and that's it's a start to the conversation.
yeah, no, here in California we do as well. Most of the time we're able to say that the weather say good things about it, but not all the time. But still, I think it's a little bit better than it is in the UK. It's
Right
generally,
now, I'm sure.
especially as you get more towards the coast. But uh, what was I going to ask you? Let's see on my list of questions here. Oh yeah, where did it go? Um, why did you just Professional speaking. I went to your website and it showed how you were basically speaking in front of like 2,500 people. That, for some people that would be the scariest thing imaginable. What what made you want to do that? How, do you just ended up enjoying it? Talk to me about that.
I I started speaking at networking events, so I I would speak locally. If I was at a networking event, it wasn't. If I was running a networking event here in Oxford and the real speaker didn't turn up, the person that we'd booked for the morning didn't show, I would end up filling in that 15-minute slot. And I started doing more and more of that, and then I started getting booked to speak at networking events. No one was paying me for this, but I was quite enjoying it. And then one day, someone came up to me after the networking event and said, we've got a conference coming up for accountants. How much would you charge to speak at our events? And I offered them a fee and they accepted it and they paid me and I stood up at their accountants conference and spoke
What do you talk to accountants about?
about networking, about
Oh,
network, because like a lot of business owners, they're really good at what they do, but they're not great at promoting themselves at networking events. So I talked to them about how to use social media as well, because by the time I started speaking, that was a thing. But I never, um, I don't think it doesn't feel like I chose this path. It feels like it chose me because
mm.
I would literally fill in when the real person didn't show up, and then someone came to me and asked me how much I would charge, and
You became the real person.
yeah, I did. I like that actually. I might write that down somewhere.
You weren't the
Yeah,
replacement anymore. You were the guy who, fortunately, who hopefully they never had to replace.
that's. Do you know what? I'm having that for a social media post, John. That's good actually. I went from replacing the real person to being the real person. I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I definitely I've had that experience too. When you're public speaking, I've done a little bit of it, but for me, it's more been sort of a moderating a panel type of a thing. I haven't ever done the go and speak for 15 minutes TED Talk style like I'm imagining you doing it. For me, it's and certainly that's kind of a thankless job. That's like sort of devoting your time. You just want to get the experience, get in front of people, and ask questions about crypto to the four crypto experts in front of the 34 people who've shown up at that event who want to hear about the crypto news. And so that's helped me learn about crypto, but and it's helped me learn how to moderate. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, yes, as you were saying, um, what's it like? Why did you want to do that? The speaking.
I um I go to a lot of punk concerts and rock concerts,
Oh, great!
and I might be preempting a question that you had later on. However,
Yeah.
the link here is that my dad is musically talented.
Mm.
At least two of my sons are musically talented. It completely passed me by. So when I started speaking on stage, and when they put me on big stages in front of hundreds or thousands of people, I suddenly realized this is fun. Like, I can be amusing on stage. I give really clear business messages. People message me afterwards to say that they've used what I said and they've sold more immediately as a result. But I make it funny, I make it fun. And I'm having an absolute ball when I'm on stage because just the relationship that you have with the audience for the 25 or 30 minutes that you're there is really good fun. There is something very, very shallow and very amazing about getting a load of people clapping when you come off stage and thanking you for doing the thing which I now do for a living. But when people message me afterwards and thank me, so I get to pretend I'm a rock star because people clap and I'm on a stage, but the whole actual ability to be a rock star completely passed me by.
What are your what? Speaking of rock bands and punk bands, what are some of your favorites?
So I've seen Green Day quite a lot of times. I've seen Foo Fighters a lot of times, and I'm seeing Dropkick Murphys from Boston
Yeah.
in a couple of weeks. Actually, they're in the UK for a couple of nights. So quite a lot of quite heavy and punk bands as well, and things like Irish punk from people like Dropkick Murphys. I'm 54 years old as we record this. I still get down the front of gigs, and these days I really regret it the next day and still 2 weeks later, but I still enjoy that. I really
Do
do.
you do the mosh pit
I,
stuff?
I do the mosh pit. I've no idea. It's been 5 years since I saw Dropkick Murphys, and their mosh pits are a little bit legendary. I'm not sure I'll be brave enough this time, but I'll certainly go down there for a little while.
You can hang out around the periphery of it, perhaps, and
I
just
can and pretend that I was there.
hmm yeah. I've been to a few of those myself. I've seen the Foo Fighters. I've seen Green Day. Love them both very much. I've never been. I haven't been to sort of real punk band, like the Dropkick Murphys or anything like that. But I admire those who can handle that. The tough guys who can deal with those.
Tough
But
or
look, so
tough or stupid. I'm not sure which one it is.
as we get older, you mentioned, you're 54, and you mentioned maybe we don't want to be doing the mosh pits anymore, and that it sort of ties into when we talked ahead of time, talked about the physical challenges that we're all dealing with as we age, and you basically, I want to hear you talk about sort of the biggest challenge that you're facing right now, which sounds like it's chronic illness. I mean, I have my own issues that I'm dealing with as I get older, and you were mentioning yours, so tell us a little bit about the chronic issues that you're facing, and sort of the biggest challenge and how you're dealing with that right now.
I I get accused of being positive a lot, and I try to look at everything as an opportunity. So when I was 27 years old, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and to be honest, for most of my life, it hasn't been much of a problem. A hospital visit every couple of years, but apart from that, no real issue. And last year it put me in hospital, and my wife and I, we were speaking at an event in Europe. I was speaking at a conference for lawyers, and I wasn't feeling very well, and I wasn't being completely honest about how bad I was feeling. But that was in July, and then a couple of weeks after that, I ended up having some scans and so on, and then I was admitted to hospital. I was really quite ill. Ulcerative colitis is quite debilitating, and there were about 3 months of last year where I really didn't work or worked really, really part time.
Mm.
And there was a hell of a lesson in all of that, in as much as as not only the person who owns the business, but the person who is front of house and does pretty much everything. The business relies on me speaking at conferences and so on. I couldn't do any of that, and that became a real challenge. But then what happened was that I started talking openly on social media about having a chronic illness, and about the fact that because it's a bowel condition, people don't really talk about it, and the world went mad. The world reacted so well to me starting to be honest and saying, "Do you know what? I'm the guy who smiles all the time, but actually I don't." And this has happened, and it's really quite rubbish. And how do you continue to run a business when some days you just can't get out of bed? And I've been in hospital, and it's led to so many opportunities. So from having to have almost 3 months off last year, I've suddenly found that this authenticity, for want of a better word, about actually talking about this stuff openly and honestly, has led to so many people getting in touch and saying, "Oh, I thought it was just me," or "I'm running a business and I've got rheumatoid arthritis, or I've got heart issues," or and it turns out that there's quite a big sector of the entrepreneur self-employed community who are probably here because we can set our own hours. We can take time off when we need to with illness without having to ask a boss or anything like that. And I think there's quite a big sector of us for whom running a business around our illness is actually a thing, and it works for us. So on the one hand, it was a really huge challenge last year. It was a big worry to my wife and to me. And on the other hand, I think we've turned it into quite a lot of opportunities this year. I'm actually in conversation at the moment with the charity Crohn's and Colitis UK, because they saw me speak at an event a couple of
Mhm.
weeks ago, and they've approached me to do some business training work with them. So
Yeah.
it really has turned into a completely joined up opportunity for me.
Do you think that for some of the speaking roles, speaking engagements you're going to have in the next several months and years, do you think you'll be talking more about chronic illness in those speaking engagements?
Yeah, I think I will. I've always I've always actually avoided the term motivational speaker, because that's not what I thought I did. But then on the other hand, I hope to motivate and infuse people who are building a business around their illness, that whatever it happens to be, and help them to make a success of that. So I've started talking about it more and more on social media. I was asked specifically to weave it into my presentation a fortnight ago, and now I'm being asked to actually include it in what I say, because people want to know that they're not alone. People want to know that they're not the only person who didn't make any money last month because they couldn't do anything and they're having to work it out, or they've had to let a few people down last year because they had to drop out of things. When I started saying, actually, this is my life at the moment, I've had to phone some people and say I can't turn up. There was an honesty behind that people really seem to like. So I'm talking about it more and more now.
Yeah, this is really a fertile ground for a lot of discussion. I think that, millions of people are going through chronic illness in some form or another. We don't live in a culture that really wants us to be able to talk about it very much because we have to be so bent on achieving, and there's so much emphasis on the monthly recurring revenue, et cetera, whatever it may be. And so it's a big subject, and I'm glad you brought it up. I wish we could talk about it more, but we're gonna we only have a couple more minutes before we have to wind down. So
I
before
know.
we do that, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you again at some point someday about chronic illness,
I
because
hope
I've
so.
had my own journey in that area too. But but getting back to books, you are an author. One of the things that I wanted to make sure I asked you about was your recommendations for entrepreneurs on some key books that they should take a look at. And I understand that one of them might be one of your books. So yeah, if you could give us those recommendations, that'd be super helpful.
I the book that I mention most on stage, actually, apart from my own book, the best book that was ever written about social media 90 years ago. I talk about How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, because
Mm,
I've got it here. I've got it here. I got it out for our conversation. This is my copy that I bought in 1989. The
mm,
pages are all yellow. It's been read 100 times. Um, but what Dale Carnegie talks about in the book about being interested, you'll win more friends in 2 months by being interested than you will by trying to be interesting to them. And it really applies to networking and social media, because the way that we win friends, we build relationships, is to go out and ask about other people, find out about them. But what people think they have to do is go out and talk about themselves. And I've loved that book. I've loved the lessons which I've learnt in it. I never slam doors. If I suggest that people should buy from me and they say no, I make sure that the door is left open for the future, and so on. Feel the fear and do it anyway would be another recommendation for a book which I think all entrepreneurs should read. Feel the fear and do it anyway by Susan Jeffers. When I first read that book, and I thought that everyone who was out there doing things confidently were naturally confident about what they were doing. And when I read that book and learned from that book that most people start off by being scared, but the difference between the successful people is that they do the stuff even if they are scared. That was such an eye opener to me, and that's a book that I've read over and over again. I've also got to give a shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk's books, because I met Gary Vaynerchuk early-ish in his career in 2012,
mm.
and I've been following his career since about 2008, and everything that he talks about with social media, jab, 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 right hook, and crush it were books that I read early on. And if people are buying all of those on Amazon, they might just want to invest in business networking for dummies at the same time. If I can be cheeky and get away with that.
You definitely can. Um, all right, Stefan, we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. We've already gone a half hour. It's amazing. It's so easy to talk to you about so many of these subjects. What's one final bit of, lesson or, a piece of advice you'd give to entrepreneurs on how to run their business better before we go?
Go out there and be you. It took me half a century to be brave enough to actually be there as myself, this flawed human being with a chronic illness, and doing networking the way that I like to do networking, and actually turning up looking like a middle-aged punk these days. But go out there and be yourself. The right people buy into you when you let them. That's the biggest advice that I would give to anyone, particularly those younger than me now. Just be brave enough to be you. The right people will react to it.
Where can people find you online? What's the best place they can reach you?
I, as you would expect, I exist everywhere. So I am Stefan Thomas Biz, Stefan Thomas BIZ, on every social media platform, because the guy who lost 60 million in Bitcoin is also called Stefan Thomas. And so, and I'm not him. So I am Stefan Thomas Biz, BIZ, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, but with a name like Stefan Thomas, you'll find me. I'm not difficult to find. I exist on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and anywhere else that's got a social media platform.
Stefan Thomas, great to have you on Everything Entrepreneurship. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, John.